Hi, welcome back. How did it go last night? I hope you had a really sweet time. And at some point, whenever I'm teaching this process, we come across a wall of resistance. Perhaps you met that last night. Maybe you didn't, but it's going to come up at some point. When we bow and welcome each of our sacred guests to come up, and we start asking these questions, we can sometimes meet this really strong opposition. It doesn't want to go there. Now, earlier in the week, when we were looking at our habitual patterns of resistance, that day that you were watching all of the ways that primal survival was just booting in and starting to repress or avoid all of the movements inside of you, essentially, there's a point in this process that comes up so powerful and really strong. And essentially what happens is that whenever we were little, for most of us, we had traumatic experiences, sometimes subtly, sometimes lots, and our little beings didn't have the ability to process that information. We didn't have mature psyches. So say you got lost at a park, or mom and dad were arguing, or there was somebody who spanked you or hit you or any kind of version of this. Now, the little person can't jump up into a mature psyche and begin the whole processing of like, well, dad's misunderstood and da-da-da, and really I'll be found and it's okay. And it can't do that. So little people's bodies gyrates with the trauma. And primal survival comes in, grabs all that overwhelming sensation and buries it in the body. It's this way of protecting itself from this pain. Now, in the same way that if we took something and we buried it at the bottom of the ocean, burying it doesn't make it go away. Every single wave of the ocean will still hit against it. So even though this early childhood trauma, which you may have many of them, is buried in the body, it doesn't mean that every wave of life isn't still hitting against it. And what happens is our little resistant soldiers, I call them, all of these little habits of primal survival, they sort of stand guard so that if anything hits it or comes near it, it's going to throw up a resistance to make you not have to feel the sensation. Primal survival is primal. It doesn't know about healing. It doesn't know about transformation. It doesn't know that everything is source. Everything is essentially one. It believes so much in the separateness and the threat of everything to itself. So it's just moving on these really old primal orders. Now, that's what you're meeting. So at some point, you're bowing to our sacred guest, and we start to ask these two questions, and there's no softening. There's no tenderness. We just hate it. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's humiliation, maybe it's anger, there'll be something. And you hit this point of resistance. And what I want you to do right there is to actually welcome a new monk. And the new monk is resistance. It's primal survival. So I say to people, my students, I just say, oh, we just have a guest in front of that shame, or in front of that humiliation, or in front of that rage. And the guest is, no, I don't want to. And we ask the same questions. How old were you the first time you felt that way? And what was happening that you felt that way? And even there, you're going to start to sometimes feel a softening or still sometimes feel this resistance. And all that means is your system got identified with that resistant pattern. You forgot in this moment of the intensity that you're the awareness of this resistance pattern. And you might feel this feeling of it's distasteful, or I don't like it, or I don't want to be this way, or it can't be here like this. We just have another sacred monk who doesn't want to be here, who doesn't like this, who doesn't think this should be that way. And the first thing we want to do is say, how old was I the first time I felt this way? Now, I don't want you to play a mind game here. I don't want you to keep, like a game of dominoes, just sticking a bunch in front of the people. I want you to actually notice when you have become identified, because you're going to feel the effort. It's not this easy effortlessness. And at that point, look to see just who's the guest and welcome that guest. You may have one or two that you need to welcome, but find that place where you unhook from identity, you recognize it's this movement of resistance, and you can bow down to the sacred guest. Right here is where we end the war. Right here is where we start to discover the peace. There really is a movement inside of you that can welcome it. We just have to find it. So that's your invitation again tonight. If you have not met that resistance yet, we're going to take another 90 minutes tonight, so plenty of opportunity for you to discover. And in tonight's practice, as you greet everything inside of you and let yourself bow to it, let your heart soften, meet it with a tender embrace. That is the direct experience of peace, and that is a powerful peace, because it's not in the external mirror, which from my point of view is highly impotent. Instead, it's from the internal, which is from where I come from, there only is the internal, reflecting to create this movie out here. That's a really powerful place to begin with peace. And to become peaceful in ourselves, meeting our own selves this way, liberates this frenetic mind activity, which is primarily made up of all the ways we can resist and judge and have all these opinions about this. So we're practicing what it is to surrender and meet with an intelligence. And at this point, I hope I don't even have to tell you about the intelligence, because you're getting to know it. You're becoming much more intimate with each of these movements, and embedded in them is the intelligence and the gift. So let's go again tonight for another 90-minute practice, or maybe it's this morning, or maybe it's this afternoon, somewhere in the next 12 hours, and I will meet you here tomorrow.